Coming in at number 5, we have Cthulhu's Reign by Daryl Schweitzer. Cthulhu's Reign is an anthology of original horror short stories edited by Daryl Schweitzer. The book collects 15 short stories by various authors with an introduction by the editor. They all share the Cthulhu mythos setting originated by H.P. Lovecraft, with the twist that the dreaded revival of the fearsome Great Old Ones who once ruled the earth have finally come back to take it back, taking the mythos from the realm of contemporary horror into that of apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction. Some of the darkest hints in all of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos relate to what will happen after the Old Ones return and take over the earth. In the Dunwich horror, the semi-human half-breed Wilbur Whately speaks in his diary of travelling to non-human cities at the Earth's magnetic poles when the Earth is cleared off, and hints at his own promised transfiguration. Very few mythos stories have ever touched on this. What happens when the stars are right? The sunken city of R'lyeh rises from beneath the waves, and Cthulhu is unleashed upon the world for the last time. What happens when the other Old Ones, long since banished from our universe, break through and descend from the stars? What would the reign of Cthulhu be like on a totally transformed planet where mankind is no longer the master? It won't be simply the end of everything, it will be a time of new horrors and of utter strangeness. It will be a time when humans with a taint of unearthly blood in their ancestry may come into their own. It will be a time foreseen only by authors with the kind of finely honed imaginative visions as those included in Cthulhu's Reign. I don't want to reveal too much or give away any spoilers, but this is definitely one for the reading list. In at number 4, The Croning by Laird Barron. As one of the most prolific contributors to contemporary cosmic horror, Barron has not only written tons of short stories in the subgenre, but some full-length novels as well. The Croning tells the story of Donald Miller and his wife Michelle, who have been married for nearly half a century and travelled all over the world. In Michelle's relentless pursuit of odd anthropological findings, Don has always trailed her happily from what he can remember at least, but now, at the age of almost 80, he's starting to realise that something about Michelle isn't quite right. Now all things must converge. Donald will discover the dark secrets along the edges, unearthing savage truths about his wife Michelle, their adult twins, and all he knows and trusts. For Donald is about to stumble on the secret of the Croning. Strange things exist on the periphery of our existence, haunting us from the darkness looming beyond our firelight. Black magic, weird cults, and worse things loom in the shadows. The children of Old Leech have been with us from time immemorial, and they love us. If you haven't read Laird Barron yet, I would recommend starting with short stories first to get acquainted with his peculiar style, but if you're looking to take that relationship to the next level, The Croning is what you need. In at number 3, we have Dreams from the Witch House, edited by Lynn Jamnick. This anthology brings more fresh perspective to cosmic horror with 19 thrilling short stories, all by female authors. These range from pieces written years ago and now finding a new audience, such as Joyce Carol Oates' Shadow of the Evening, to works by up-and-coming authors like R.A. Kalin, who authored the final story in the collection Memoris. The history of the old world is shrouded in secrecy. Creatures and forces unimaginable inhabited this realm for eons, long before any human navigated the surface of the earth. As the old ones have slumbered or observed from afar, humans have assembled civilization upon this fragile planet. Yet the whispers from the elders have been growing stronger, their energy once again seeping into the world. These whispers are being felt throughout the earth, from the roots of our flora to the dreams of our children. They are preparing us for what is to come. Each story deconstructs or reshapes typical Lovecraftian elements in some way, tending to emphasize individual experiences rather than giving into overwhelming cosmic madness. As Jamnick notes in the introduction, such stories fill not only a narrative gap, also a huge cultural one, that of a female voices in cosmic horror. Some of the most exciting Lovecraftian fiction is currently being written by women, she writes. We're moving away from the elder old guard, who in some ways as stifling to diverse perspectives of the unnameable as Lovecraft's own views on the number of topics. One critic wrote, I quote, "I recommend this collection to anyone who enjoys incredible weird fiction. I was not disappointed with any of the stories. The artwork that Sarah created for each story are beautifully rendered." In at number 2, we have The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. Praised as one of the most nuanced Lovecraft retellings in the 21st century, The Ballad of Black Tom begins in 1924 Harlem with the hustler Tommy Tester. Tom has always kept a low profile, even as a street musician, until the day he's recruited by a reclusive millionaire Robert Soydam, who wants Tom's help to manipulate a creature of inconceivable darkness. With the introduction of jaded New York detective Malone, this tale twists into a true nightmare, as Malone recounts findings that signify a completely changed world. Charles Thomas Tester hustles to put food on the table, keep the roof over his father's head, from Harlem to Flushing Meadows to Red Hook. He knows what magic a suit can cast, the invisibility a guitar case can provide, and the curse written on his skin that attracts the eyes of wealthy white folks and their cops. But when he delivers an occult tomb to a reclusive sorceress in the heart of Queens, Tom opens a door to a deeper realm of magic and earns the attention of things best left sleeping. Not only is this novella compulsively readable, it's also another significant contribution to the subgenre. As an African-American man himself, Lavelle has noted that The Ballad of Black Tom is a conscious response to Lovecraft's racism and xenophobia, particularly in his story The Horror at Red Hook, upon which Lavelle's work is based. And indeed, by mirroring these prejudices in his book setting, which again is 1920s New York, Lavelle has created a brilliantly commentative and deeply resonant modern work that any reader can enjoy. The Ballad of Black Tom succeeds in being a compelling story that offers a new perspective and take on Lovecraft. Lavelle could put this spin on all Lovecraft's work and they should be a success. Despite a few serious moments, this is an entertaining read. And finally, in at number 1, we have Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin R. Kiernan. We'll wrap things up with an exceptional piece of cosmic horror by another female author, Caitlin Kiernan. In her novel Agents of Dreamland, a government agent called the Signalman attempts to gather information about an exclusive cult who call themselves the Children of the Next Level. The cult members consume strange fungi to physically elevate themselves, but as the Signalman finds out too late, these are no mere magic mushrooms, but biology warping weapons from another world. With plentiful body horror and a deeply disconcerting narrative style, this book is all of the best parts of Alia Whitley's The Beauty and Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5, neatly paying tribute to classic science fiction in the same breath as Lovecraftian horror. In a ranch house near the shore of the Salton Sea, a cult leader gathers up the weak and susceptible, the children of the next level, and offers them something to believe in and a chance for transcendence. The future is coming and they will help to usher it in. A day after the events at the ranch house which disturbed the single man so deeply that he and his government sought out help from other sources, Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory abruptly loses contact with NASA's interplanetary probe New Horizons. Something out beyond the orbit of Pluto has made contact. A woman floating outside of time looks to the future and the past for answers to what can save humanity. In at number 5, we have The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. One of many Lovecraft stories on our list, The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories was released back in 1999 and contains the following works of Lovecraft: Dagon, The Statement of Randolph Carter, Facts Concerning the Late Arthur Jermyn and His Family, Cellophase, Nyarlathotep, The Picture in the House, The Outsider, Herbert West Reanimator, The House, The Rats in the Walls, The Festival, He, Cool Air, The Call of Cthulhu, The Color Out of Space, The Whisper in Darkness, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and The Haunter of the Dark. Yes, that's a lot of a lot. But for now, let's just focus on the title itself, The Call of Cthulhu. The Call of Cthulhu was written back in 1926 and follows narrator Francis Wayland Thurston as he unearths alarming information about the figure of Cthulhu, a titanic monster with tentacles and the wings of a dragon. Along the way, we learn of a cult dedicated to Cthulhu, chant for his inevitable return. As most will know, Cthulhu is one of Lovecraft's most infamous creations, so saying that, the story is definitely worth the read, as are the rest of the shorts included in the collection. What's better than one story? 18, that's right. Coming in at number 4, we have Shadows of Carcosa, Edgar Allan Poe, Bram Stoker, and more. Shadows of Carcosa is a collection of cosmic horror stories written by some of the greats, including H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, Bram Stoker, Ambrose Bierce, and Henry James. To quote H.P. Lovecraft, "The true weird tales has something more than a secret murder, bloody bones, or a sheeted form clanking chains. An atmosphere of breathless and unexplainable dread of outer, unknown forces must be present, a hint of that most terrible conception of the human brain, a malign and particular suspension or defeat of those fixed laws of nature, which are our only safeguard against the assaults of chaos and the demons of unplumbed space." Now, one of the many stories included in the book is Lovecraft's Color Out of Space, a short story written back in 1927. In the tale, an unnamed narrator pieces together the story of an area known by the locals as the Blasted Heath in the wild hills west of the fictional town of Arkham, Massachusetts. The narrator discovers that many years ago a meteorite crashed there, poisoning every living being nearby. Vegetation grows large but foul-tasting, animals are driven mad and deformed into grotesque shapes, and the people go insane or just die one by one. This quickly became one of Lovecraft's most popular stories and remained his personal favourite of his short stories. It has since been adapted into a movie starring the great Nicolas Cage. It did get very good reviews. I have yet to watch it. I know a lot of you have been on me about watching it, but don't worry, I'll get around to it. In at number 3 we have Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. A newer selection on our list, Lovecraft Country is a 2016 dark fantasy novel written by Matt Ruff, who explores the conjunction between the horror fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, as well as racism in the United States during the era of Jim Crow laws, as experienced by black science fiction fan Atticus Turner and his family. Throughout Lovecraft Country, Atticus must navigate cosmic forces and basic civil rights while embarking on a journey to find his mysteriously missing father, employing the services of his uncle, who wrote a guide to safe travel for black people in the 1950s. On his journey, Atticus and co. encounter many large obstacles. However, it is the ending which is a real doozy, with a Get Out level plot twist. Honestly, this novel is worth a read, cosmic horror fan or not. Not to mention, in 2017, HBO announced that they were prepping an adaptation of the novel with Jordan Peele and J.J. Abrams as executive producers. The show is set to be released this summer at the time of this recording, and I, for one, cannot wait. It's been on my list for months. Coming in at number 2 we have The Fisherman by John Langan. One of the newer books on our list, The Fisherman, was published back in 2016 by contemporary horror author John Langan. The plot concerns Dan and Abe, two widowers who have found solace in each other's company and a shared passion for fishing. The pair hear rumours of Dutchman's Creek, a steep-banked, fast-moving creek that offers the promise of fine fishing, and of something more, a possibility too fantastic to be true. However, like most things, Dutchman's Creek is not the work of God, and is instead quite the opposite. Yet the men find themselves drawn into a tale of the place, which will ultimately bring the pair face to face with all that they have lost, and with the price they must pay to regain it. Will the pair be dissuaded by a local who knows of the creek's true history, or will they seek out its magic? The novel is incredibly immersive and will have you biting your nails with each turn of the page. For fans of cosmic horror, this is a modern masterpiece and should be read by all lovers of the genre. The book is almost 2 stories under one title, with it being equally a story about loss and grief as it is a horror story that will keep you engaged and terrified from start to finish. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. At the Mountains of Madness is a science fiction novella written by the creator of cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft, back in 1931. The story itself details the events of a disastrous expedition to the Antarctic continent in September 1930, and what was ultimately discovered there by a group of explorers led by the narrator Dr. William Dye of Miskatonic University. Over the course of the story, Dye details a series of previously untold events in the hopes of deterring another group of explorers who wish to return to the continent. Throughout the story, we learn of lost cities, incomprehensibly weird creatures, oozing monsters, and of course insanity and pure horror. Now, one of those creatures so beautifully detailed in At the Mountains of Madness is Shoggoth. I quote, "Formless protoplasm able to mock and reflect all forms and organs and processes, viscous agglutinations of bubbling cells, rubbery 15-foot spheroids, infinitely plastic and ductile, slaves of suggestion, builders of cities, more and more sullen, more and more intelligent, more and more amphibious, more and more imitative. Great God, what madness made even those blasphemous old ones willing to use and carve such things?" Absolutely terrifying. At the Mountains of Madness has often been described as the perfect Lovecraftian tale, and one of the greatest cosmic horror books. The story even popularized ancient astronaut theories, as well as Antarctica's place in the ancient astronaut mythology. The story has of course been adapted numerous times since its initial publication, with director Guillermo del Toro even attempting to get a movie made based on the story. Fingers crossed.
Number 5, Dead Space. Dead Space is one of my favorite video games, like ever released, and it was one of my favorite video games ever released again when they put it out again in 2023 with some new paint on it. Dead Space is about as cosmic horror as it can get, and it's not just because it's set in space, although, you know, that is a really big contributor because the monsters came from space. In a far future, humanity has taken to the stars mostly to strip mine planets for their natural resources by cracking them open like a walnut. Scary thing is, I can really see us doing this. On a routine mining operation, the planet cracker USG Ishimura discovers something buried inside the planet, an alien relic called the Marker, a giant evil looking obelisk covered in alien hieroglyphs, which you would think you would know well enough. Maybe we should just leave that where it is and not bring that home, but no one on board the ship had ever seen a horror movie, I guess. Unsurprisingly, it does not go terribly well, and within about 20 minutes after bringing the Marker on board, everyone on the Ishimura is removing their eyes and writing cryptic messages with their body fluids and having vivid hallucinations of their dead loved ones, and also some horrific ancient evil sealed away as giving life to disembodied flesh and trying to swallow everyone into one big meat mass. It's bad is what I'm trying to get across. It's very bad things happening up in space. I don't even know how much we can show on this one and keep that PG rating. As the series progresses, we learn that this evil has been going on for a long time, way before us, and it's swallowed countless planets and civilizations, and humanity is really just another blip on the radar. Their ultimate goal is to converge all biological life on a target planet into this big, horrific creature called a Brethren Moon, this big, like, planet-sized legion of flesh that eats other planets. Dead Space makes you feel absolutely helpless, alone, and just completely insignificant. By the end of the first one, you've seen literally every single character die, and you are the only survivor of the first one. You're just one engineer hopelessly trying to survive against a primordial species of pure evil. And as the series was coming to a horrific, exciting conclusion, the series did get cancelled on a cliffhanger by EA, which is the most cosmic horror thing I can think of. And as always, if you're looking for more horror content, be it scary stories, true stories, fake stories, alien sightings, cryptids, monsters, conspiracies, really big sharks, Top 5 Scary has a little bit of everything and then some on top of that. So slap that bell for me, subscribe, and don't miss a single scare. But keep watching this video, okay? If you don't mind, I worked hard on it. Alright, moving on. Number 4, Event Horizon. Event Horizon is one of my favorite underrated horror movies and is also one of the major inspirations for Dead Space, which is probably why I like it so much. I think just something scary happening on a spaceship is the coolest setting imaginable for a work of horror fiction. Scary things don't happen in space, and if you'd screamed, who would even hear it? Event Horizon is the name of the movie and also the titular spaceship, which went missing in deep space years prior to the film's start and has just reappeared. That's normal, spaceships do that all the time. A recovery crew is sent out to the Event Horizon to try and figure out just what happened and learn pretty quickly that things went to hell, like in the most literal sense of that term. It turns out that the Event Horizon was testing out a new kind of warp technology that allows for faster than light travel, and somebody crossed a wrong wire, didn't check their calibrations, and they accidentally got sent through hell. Hate when that happens. You really gotta be careful with the warp. Just ask the Imperium. That's one for my Warhammer fans out there, all two of you. Event Horizon is that kind of cosmic horror where the enemy is just something invisible and undefeatable and infinitely larger than ourselves. It's not so much that there's like a demon or a devil that's bothering people, just this incomprehensible power beyond our paltry human understanding that drives you to jabbering madness, the kind that makes you tear your eyes out and bump uglies like a Hieronymus Bosch painting. If you've never seen Event Horizon, genuinely cannot recommend it enough. I always felt like it should have been a way bigger deal than it was. I feel like there's room for some sequels or something. It's got some fantastic performances from Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill, and maybe has one of the genuinely scariest scenes in a horror movie ever. If you've seen the movie, the security footage of what happened to the original crew of the Event Horizon is forever burned in the parts of my brain that I talk to my therapist about. Number 3, Annihilation. Now, I've talked about Annihilation on the channel more than a few times because I am a massive fan of the movie, and I'm putting it here because while it's definitely more famous as a movie, and that's what I know it as best, it was also a book, and I was worried if I didn't have at least one book on here, you would think I'm illiterate. I am, but that's a different issue. I honestly don't read enough, so if you you have a great cosmic horror book that isn't by old hodgepodge Lovecraft, shout it out down below so I can stop shaking whenever I get asked to talk about a medium that isn't video games or movies. Anyway, back to the original topic. Annihilation is a fantastic cosmic horror story that makes you feel pitifully small, completely confused, and maybe a tiny bit better about yourself. A biologist, Lena, gets a bit of a surprise when her thought-to-be-dead husband returns home but comes back different. Wrong, as if he's not really the same guy anymore. It's not long until she finds herself following in her husband's footsteps, swept up in a giant government conspiracy, investigating what he was looking into, a quarantined area of the swamps of Florida that have been affected by some alien presence called the Shimmer that is warping everything and merging all biological life together into this horrific cosmic gumbo, making everyone into these scary amalgamations of different creatures and plants. And I know for a fact I have shrieked in a previous video at length about how much I love the Annihilation Bear, which is an absolute showstopper of horrifying creature design. Throw up a picture of the Annihilation Bear, would you kindly? Oh, love that thing. Annihilation is the kind of story that really worms its way into your brain, has you questioning just about everything, and then asking if you can't tell the difference, does any of it really matter? It's a nice one to get you thinking about all these big questions like, why are humans the way they are? Why are people in love hurt each other? Why do humans have such self-destructive tendencies? And what would happen if a bear got merged with a crocodile and a human, and how yucky would that look? You know, all the really big philosophical questions. If you still haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to stop mentioning it in these videos until you do. Even you. Number 2, The Void. The Void is everything I am looking for in a movie, and I know that my tastes aren't always the same as you guys. The Void is wet, it's sticky, it's gross, and it's a low-budget horror movie about a troubled cop with personal issues. That ticks all my boxes. When a small-town deputy notices a wounded man crawling in the road, he takes him out to a local hospital run by a weary overnight staff with limited resources, including his ex-wife he's got a bit of a tense relationship with. Definitely already a long night. Things are seeming weird, what with the legions of cryptic cloaked cultists surrounding the hospital, preventing them from leaving. He starts to have a hunch that maybe something's up, especially when everyone around him starts to mutate into these horrific flesh beasts that would make David Cronenberg blush. It becomes very clear, very fast, that whoever these cultists are, they've found a gateway to another world and are quite intent on inviting their horrific slimy friends from the other side over. The Void really captures that feeling of just being totally out of your element. No one has any idea what's going on the entire time, neither do you. They're just scared and in way over their head. You know, you're not dealing with like some special forces, highly trained soldiers, or a secret government agency that's been tracking this cult and these gods for years or anything. Just a very tired deputy and an overworked hospital staff trying to deal with madness overtaking everyone, and most of their patients mutating into disgusting tentacle beasts. If you're a fan of monster movies with practical effects, The Void does not disappoint at all. Takes a lot of cues from John Carpenter's legendary horror movie The Thing, with the monsters looking a lot like The Thing. The whole movie kind of actually has this like faux 80s movie vibe. Like it's the kind of thing you'd pull out of a blockbuster that was forgotten about. Definitely seems like John Carpenter would have worked on it. The Void gets a massive recommend from me for horror movie fans, for cosmic horror fans, and for people who just really want to support low-budget independent Canadian cinema. I know that's most of you out there. And finally, coming in at number 1, Uzumaki. We don't talk about horror manga on this channel nearly enough. It's an entire medium out there of fantastic storytelling and art that will drive you bonkers. If you're a fan of horror manga at all, like even a little bit, then you know there's pretty much no one who does it better than Junji Ito, who's kind of like the Stephen King of horror manga, cranking out banger after banger, all as memorable and macabre as you could possibly hope. Ito's works vary in content, but most of them are usually about something absolutely disgustingly horrible happening to your body, and Uzumaki is no exception, and probably one of the most famous examples of his work. A lot of fans consider Uzumaki to be his magnum opus. Not me, I'm a Tomy guy all the way. Uzumaki tells the story of a Japanese town that has fallen to some incredibly bizarre curse affecting everything, spiraling inwards. Everything. It starts small, you know, people's hair starts to curl and then starts to move onto people's flesh. You might have seen like, there's a very famous image from this manga of like a girl whose face is all spiraled inwards, and then the town's geography, everything starts to spiral. Our protagonists leave this cursed town, return later, discover discover that it's been years since they left, since the spiral curse is affecting the flow of time as well. Really, nothing is going right whatsoever. Eventually, they discover that this curse has been going on for a long time and is the product of an ancient evil, infinitely bigger than themselves and seemingly unstoppable. If you've never read any of Junji Ito's works at all, I cannot recommend him enough, even if you're not a big fan of manga traditionally. His stuff isn't really like most manga out there. There's no superheroes or epic powers or, big spiky haircuts and cat girls. Mostly just like horrific body horror and very creative little stories. A lot of his works have been adapted. Netflix recently just worked on an animated series based on some of his stories. I haven't had time to check it out yet, but passing that on to you if you're interested.
In at number 5, we have Songs of a Dead Dreamer. Songs of a Dead Dreamer by Thomas Ligotti was written in 1986 and is a cosmic horror short story collection, housing 3 different sections for different types of dreams. Dreams for sleepwalkers, dreams for insomniacs, and dreams for the dead. These short stories navigate through a lurid dreamscape in a bizarre and cosmic horror manner. Additionally, throughout the series, you will find a recurring theme of puppets, dreams, clowns, and inescapable fate, leaving you with a disturbing sense of uneasiness and disillusion. As the book progresses, the cosmic creepiness escalates, and like most cosmic horror stories, this book blends reality, creating a gateway to a new dimension. This new dimension invites you into the unsettling darkness that is the book. Ligotti's raw and experimental work is a response to how little our world actually matters. Furthermore, it's a play on the fact that we as humans cannot help but be drawn to the dark and dangerous, being always one precipitous step away from our horrific and total demise. You can see this directly in the book, as on every new page the character receives life or a fate worse than death. Influenced by the strange terrors of Lovecraft, Ligotti shapes his path in the cosmic horror realm with his unique yet bizarre way of storytelling. Safe to say you might not want to read this book before bed. In at number 4, we have the Imago sequence by Laird Barron. Written in 2007, the Imago sequence is an ironic riff on the classic H.P. Lovecraft story. With 9 short stories, this book is a bizarre and sanity-blasting cosmic horror novel. Evil things happen to the character in Barron's stories, and these bad things often threaten the entire race and even the planet while at it. By being driven to face the cosmic horrors for work, these characters are driven to their own demise. The characters within this novel are on a journey to collide with the greater unknown and remain unaware until it's too late, tackling the broad concept of unavoidable fate. The world that Barron creates in these stories is filled with unknown predators and the corruption of his characters. In this realm, humans are merely nothing but food to the monsters that inhabit the land, touching on themes such as race, capitalism, fear, and masculinity. Read with caution to the sheer terrifyingly heavy unhinged novel that is the Imago sequence. Barron's work is a sensory overload of complex stories and cosmic horror, and is definitely not for the faint-hearted. In at number 3, The Fisherman by John Langan. This novel is a blended mix of dark folklore, human frailties, and of course, cosmic horror. Taking place in upstate New York, it follows the story of 2 widowers who have found comfort in their shared enjoyment of fishing. After many weekends of fishing trips, they take a trip to Dutchman's Creek. The creek is known for being dangerous to fishermen, though nobody is sure why, as it has a reputation for taking the lives of fishermen who visit. What they find and hear on their way to the creek might just be the remedy for both their losses, as they meet someone who tells the horrifying tale of how the Dutchman Creek got its name. Though they find themselves in a deep and dark tale of long buried secrets and a mysterious human-like man known as the Fisherman. This new dark and unknown realm they are pulled through will bring the 2 men face to face with what they have lost, and the price they will have to pay to regain it. The Fisherman has been compared to pure Lovecraftian horror at its finest, with some Americana mixed into it, filled with personal, quiet horror and dark despair. With the overarching theme of grief and the loss of a loved one, Langan tells the story in a way that creates an atmosphere of terror and uneasiness through a surrealist vision. This is a story about bereavement, deceased wives, and some of the horrors of life told within a cosmic horror reality. Coming in at number 2, we have Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin R. Kiernan. Taking inspiration from Lovecraftian horror, Kiernan blends cosmic horror with a government investigation setting in her novel Agents of Dreamland. Taking place in Southwest America in the summer of 2015, this novel merged the atmosphere of cosmic horror with the tropes of a science fiction tale, making for a claustrophobic and unnerving experience, creating a refreshingly dark and twisted story. The similarities do not end there, as Kiernan also manages to convey the overwhelming overwhelming atmosphere of hopelessness that Lovecraft novels are best known for. Hopping around in time, telling the story of an apocalyptic cult and an investigator trying to stop the cult. The government's special agent is on the hunt to investigate an event that happened earlier in the week, though this event has no explanation but which haunts the agent, while in contrast the cult leader is gathering the weak to offer a chance for transcendence. The signalman is on the hunt for his cult leader Drew Standish after he witnesses the grisly aftermath of the transcendence he promises. As the agent tries to forget the terrifying scenes he has seen, a woman travels through time and space to understand what is happening, right before losing contact with the New Horizons probe as it makes contact with something outside of Pluto's orbit. Kiernan's passion for Lovecraft's work shines through the novel with the attention to detail and horrific dark tone of the novel. Kiernan's depiction of humanity's inevitable fall to the Elder Gods is truly Lovecraftian. Within this aspect of the novel, there's a lesson to be told about humanity's doom and the limited time for our planet. However, the author shows us that our own actions in the face of the inevitable fate of humanity are what gives us our humanity. And in the end, the unavoidable end to our world does not negate the importance of compassion you can give while waiting for the impending doom. And finally, in at number 1, we have A Lush and Seething Hell, Two Tales of Cosmic Horror. Bringing together his best-selling cosmic horror short stories, John Horner Jacobs creates a terrifying novel that examines the violence and depravity of the human condition, while adding the surrealistic aspect of cosmic horror. This novel is a mix between the supernatural and psychological of the scary imagination of Lovecraft. The story, My Heart Struck Sorrow, follows the story of a music archivist at the Library of Congress as he is tasked with gathering recordings of a recently passed ethnomusicologist, where he would be led down a road of the desperate revelation of grief and guilt. The second short story in this novel, The Sea Dreams, It Is the Sky, it is a much shorter but still delivers in eeriness. This story revolves around the fictional South American country of Madeira, with two main characters whose lives become intertwined. When one of the characters finds the other's journal that is dripping with horrible secrets, what follows is a disturbing scene and skin-wrenching terror. This novel is most known for being breathtakingly haunting, which takes you on a terrifying journey into the darkness, compelling us to confront secrets best left hidden. Both stories are filled with unsettling moments. This novel is where the parallels lie between the personal trauma and dread, and what lies beyond the edge of reality. Jacob decodes what it means to truly understand how humanity can crumble within seconds and the guilt of being liable for its deconstruction. This chilling duo of emotional stories will have you awake at night guessing what's real and what's fiction. Coming in at number 5, Lock and Key. Lock and Key is an American comic book series written by Joe Hill and illustrated by Gabriel Rodriguez, and published by IDW Publishing. The plot is presented in non-chronological order. During the American Revolution, a group of rebels, hiding beneath the future Key House, discover a portal to another dimension, the plains of Leng, filled with demons who can mesmerize anyone that sees them and possesses them through touch. However, when demons attempt to enter the real world, they collapse into lumps of whispering iron, which young smith Benjamin Locke forges into a variety of magical keys, including the Omega Key, which seals the entrance to the dimension. The magic of the Key House gradually evolves over the years, including a spell which causes occupants to forget about the keys and the magic of the house when they pass their 18th birthday. The narrative of Lock and Key is structured in 3 acts. Each act consists of 2 storylines of 6 monthly issues. Act 1 story arc, Welcome to Lovecraft, was a 6-issue limited series published by IDW Publishing. The series was adapted into a film trilogy which was officially announced at the 2014 Comic-Con. However, in October 2015, Joe Hill confirmed that the films are no longer happening. However, he stated that a TV series is still possible. In May 2016, Joe Hill announced he would write a TV pilot, serve as executive producer, and pitch the show to various networks. And it worked. Coming in at number 4, Fatale. Fatale is a supernatural noir comic book created by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. It was published by Image Comics between January 2012 and July 2014. The series was initially announced as a 12-issue limited series, but it was later extended to 24 issues. Fatale chronicles the life of Josephine, or Jo, an archetypical femme fatale who is seemingly immortal, having survived from the 1930s to the modern day unaged, and also has has a supernatural ability to hypnotize men into becoming intensely infatuated with her, whether she wants them to be or not. Through the decades, Jo struggles to understand and control her powers while being pursued by a violent cult. The cult worship cosmic gods reminiscent of Lovecraftian horrors, which are somehow tied to Jo. During her travels, Jo also encounters many men who quickly become entranced by her, often to fanatical degrees. They become entangled in her escapades, possibly as guardians, collaborators, and lovers. A motif of the series is how these men pay dearly for becoming involved with Jo. The narrative jumps back and forth between different time periods and points of view, primarily Jo and the men entranced by her. The first issue of the series sold well, with reviews being mostly positive, with comparisons to the creative team's previous work on Sleeper, Criminal, and Incognito. Coming in at 3, The Courtyard. Alan Moore's The Courtyard is a 2-issue comic book miniseries published back in 2003 by Avatar Press. The comic was adapted by Anthony Johnston with artwork by Jason Burrows from a 1994 prose story by Alan Moore. The plot concerns Aldo Sachs, an FBI agent using anomaly theory, a method that correlates seemingly unrelated data into a cohesive whole, to investigate 3 seemingly unrelated ritual murders around the United States. His investigation leads him to a nightclub in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where he hears of a psychoactive drug called Aklo, peddled by a mysterious veiled man named Johnny Carcosa. Sachs sets up a meet with Carcosa at the dealer's apartment building, where he is given a hallucinogenic white powder as a prelude to the Alco. Carcosa speaks an unknown language to Sachs, who experiences visions of spectral planes and hideous primordial creatures, while understanding the truth that Aklo is not a drug, but the language Carcosa spoke to him. The visions given to him by Aklo drive Sachs to murder his neighbor using the same modus operandi as the killers he was investigating. The original 1994 prose story first appeared in an anthology, The Starry Wisdom, a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft. The comic book adaptation was planned to appear in Alan Moore's Yuggoth Cultures and Other Growths, but it was published as a limited series by Avatar in January and February 2003. Coming in at number 2, Neonomicon. Neonomicon is a 4-issue comic book limited series written by Alan Moore again and illustrated by Jason Burrows, published by American company Avatar Press in 2010. The story is a sequel to Moore's The Courtyard and part of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. Moore later continued the sequence with his comic Providence. The plot concerns FBI agents Lampert and Brez, who visit Aldo Sachs at a psychiatric hospital where he has been detained since committing 2 murders. They are investigating a copycat killer and want to question Sachs about his motives. Moore talked about the genesis of the project in an interview with Wired magazine. I quote, "It was just at the time when I finally parted company with DC Comics over something dreadful that happened around the Watchmen film. I had a tax bill coming up and I needed some money quickly, so I happened to be talking to William A. Christensen from Avatar Press, and he suggested that he could provide some if I was up for doing a 4-part series. So I did. So although I took it to pay off the tax bill, I'm always going to make sure I try and I make it the best possible story I can." According to reports, Moore wanted to elaborate on some of the ideas presented in The Courtyard while at the same time telling a modern story that did not rely upon a 1930s atmosphere. Another idea was to use some of the elements he felt Lovecraft himself and pastiche writers censored or left out of the stories, such as the racism and sexual phobias. Moore explains, I quote, "Lovecraft was sexually squeamish, would only talk of certain nameless rituals, or he'd use some euphemism, blasphemous rites. It was pretty obvious, given that a lot of his stories detailed the inhuman offspring of these blasphemous rituals, that sex was probably involved somewhere along the line. But that never used to feature in Lovecraft's stories, except as a kind of suggested undercurrent. So I thought, let's put all of the unpleasant racial stuff back in, let's put sex back in, let's come up with some genuinely nameless rituals, let's give them a name." And finally coming in at number 1, Fall of Cthulhu. Fall of Cthulhu is a 2007 American comic book series written by Michael Allen Nelson and published by Boom Studios. The series itself was creatively influenced by the works of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, specifically the Call of Cthulhu, with the main characters of the comic finding themselves swept up in an ancient and elaborate plot designed by the dark god Nyarlathotep to provoke an apocalyptic war between powerful beings known as the Great Old Ones. Following the initial 15-issue series in June 2008, a sequel 4-issue miniseries subtitled God War began publication the following month. Fall of Cthulhu Apocalypse, a second 4-issue miniseries, ran from November 2008 to February 2009. Then, the third and final miniseries, Fall of Cthulhu Nemesis, acted as both a prequel and coda, detailing the origin of Mr. Arkham's pet cat. Hexed, a spin-off 4-issue limited series starring Lucifer, also written by Nelson and illustrated by Emma Riso, was published alongside Apocalypse. An ongoing series that ran for 12 issues, also titled Hex, was launched in August 2008.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Vasterian by Thomas Ligotti. A good place to start when trying to find cosmic horror outside of the established granddaddy's work is with Ligotti's tale of a man driven mad by his love for a book. Seems like a lot of Lovecraft fans may find parts of themselves here. Vasterian is a short story from the collection known as Songs of a Dead Dreamer. The anthology is split into 3 parts: dreams for sleepwalkers, insomniacs, and the dead, with Vasterian taking up residence in the 3rd. All the tales in Ligotti's collection are clearly influenced by cosmic horror, with each part becoming darker. The tale we'll discuss plays on the cliche that every book has an ideal reader by introducing us to Victor Kirion. Victor loves his dreams, so much so that he'd rather be asleep than awake. These aren't lovely flights of fancy though. They are dark, warped visions of a reality that's fallen apart. He refers to it as a beautiful land of shadows. Not everyone's cup of tea, but Mr. Kirion is happy. Soon he comes across a bookshop full of seemingly boring tomes, but a strange dark man brings him to the back and introduces him to a volume detailing the world of Vasterian. This place reminds him so intensely of his dreams that he has to have it. There's no way he can leave without this book, for it speaks to him on a deeper level than he could have ever imagined. Commentary on literary cultists, maybe? The folks so obsessively devoted to their literary gods that they'll defend that relationship jealously or even religiously. Once Kirion takes the book home, his dreams begin to change. It seems like an outside influence has come in and infected his perfect world. Things aren't exactly what they seem, and madness is waiting just around the corner. Coming in at number 4, we've got The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval. Remember the horror at Red Hook? Yeah, most of us would rather forget. They can't all be winners, can they? For all of the lastingly terrifying stories Lovecraft wrote, there were some that he just couldn't make compelling, or largely coherent, or not horribly xenophobic. Thankfully, over 90 years later, Victor Laval retold the story with some new elements to make it both fresh and palatable. The Ballad of Black Tom mirrors a lot of themes and elements originally present in the horror at Red Hook, but this time presents them in a different light. Much more flattering one, too. It tells the tale of Tommy Tester, Brooklyn-based supernatural hustler and musician. By taking on a little side gig involving some Necronomicon-adjacent deliveries, he ends up embroiled in a scheme involving the Great Old Ones. As things get dark, the story switches to the view of Detective Malone, who some will recognize from the source material. Providing an additional viewpoint and revisiting some of what made Red Hook so scary to begin with, this is a smart move to keep things interesting. By taking a look at 20s New York with all of the benefits of being alive in a modern era, Laval is able to pen a smart and topical retelling of this story. It compares cosmic indifference to racist malice and brutality, and even though some see it as a direct rebuttal to Red Hook, the Ballad of Black Tom still manages to get some terrifying cosmic horror in. Somehow, and I know this might seem a little crazy, it finds a way to connect the inhumanity of the universe to the inhumanity of people. Definitely an interesting way to interpret Lovecraft's work. Dropping in at number 3, we've got The Cipher by Kath Koja. Ah, the 90s. Home to some of the best book covers of all time, bar none. Thankfully, it wasn't all just for show. There were some good stories between the covers. In her debut novel, Kath Koja takes a weird hole in the basement of someone's apartment building and makes it an existentially terrifying, disease-ridden read. Originally titled The Fun Hole, I wonder why that was dropped, this book will take a look at a doomed couple. Nicholas and Dakota should not be together by any means. They're both full of venom and hatred, but something keeps them coming back. I guess it's the strange hole in the storage room that they're both unhealthily obsessed with. This is another thing that shouldn't be there. But the fact that it's unexplainable and somewhat explorable through the use of 90s video capture technology makes it impossible to ignore. It pulses and exudes an era of wrongness, and somehow this manages to be magnetic. Could be a commentary on both the characters and their life choices. I'm terrible for being drawn to horrid media? Nah. If the characters and subject matter don't disturb you, the prose will. The Cipher is written to make you upset at every turn. It reeks of disease and cancer. Odd sentence structure, hypnotic pacing, malignant terrors within the fun hole. This is a magnificent piece of otherworldly terror. Plus, Koja somehow managed to write this while taking care of her young child. Maybe that's what inspired the extreme darkness. Cruising in at number 2, we've got Blind Sight by Peter Watts. Fans of hard sci-fi should have their ears perked up right now. Oh, and folks with an interest in nihilism too. Maybe people who like their fiction very, very technical as well. Has this piqued any interests? Perfect. Blind Sight is a first contact story involving artificial intelligence, space vampires, and 9-legged spider things. Very cool. It opens with some choice phrases like, "If we're not in pain, we're not alive," and "You will die like a dog for no good reason." This gives you a pretty good idea of what direction the book is heading in. By addressing themes like identity and consciousness, Blind Sight makes readers wonder if they're even anything at all. It's cosmic in a more universal sense. It doesn't necessarily anthropomorphize or idolize the uncaring forces of the universe. There are no great ones or outer gods here. Instead, the universe just sorta is. There's a spacecraft known as the Rorschach that seemingly communicates with the humans aboard the Theseus. Not exactly subtle names here, but they work. The Rorschach appears to be deliberately making attempts to correspond with the Theseus, but later on it's made clear that it may not actually know what it's saying. The beings on board, though, have abilities beyond the scope of humanity and operate on a level beyond our comprehension. They don't really care about us, and we couldn't possibly understand them. You see where this is going? While a lot of hard sci-fi can get overly technical and difficult to parse, Watts does a commendable job of making it accessible enough for folks who are entering from other literary spheres. And for every big idea, there is a big scare to go along with it. But just don't expect that everything will wrap up in one tight little package. And finally, at number 1, we've got The Croning by Laird Barron. By introducing the often hard to visualize themes of cosmic horror to a doomed love story, Laird Barron finds storytelling gold in The Croning. It's the tale of a man desperately in love with his wife who is deeply involved with something occult. The children of Old Leech, if you will. The big twist, though, is that our protagonist, Donald Miller, is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. He and his wife have been together for decades, and he's followed her around the world as she sought out strange and supernatural events and objects. The plot bounces back and forth between Don in the 80s, full of life, totally cognizant of the strange events happening around him, and Don now, confused and amnesia-stricken. By dealing with the amnesiac trope in a different way, the audience is presented with some extremely effective dramatic irony. As we move between the time periods, readers become more aware of the danger Don is in and how deeply entrenched his wife is in the cult. However, as he recalls details from his past, he also forgets due to his condition. He wants to believe that he's just imagining things and that the supernatural beings aren't real, and thanks to his lack of permanent memories, they seem to be just a silly story that he's misremembering. But the threat is real, and everyone but Don knows it. Creative in its execution, terrifying in its delivery, The Croning is a shining achievement in modern cosmic horror literature. So, what did you think of the list? How many of these have you read before? Any you might pick up sometime soon? What's your favorite non-HP cosmic horror story? Coming in at number 5, we've got They, as in, they remain.
I've never seen anything like it. Never read any case study where behavior like that is even mentioned as a possibility.
Based on Laird Barron's short story 30, this is a slow burn of a cosmic horror flick that introduces all sorts of impossible ideas. An outdoorsman and a biologist are sent out to the middle of some unexplored wilderness, supposedly full of information of scientific interest and the bones of people killed by a cult. Paranoia is the name of the game, with plenty of unexplainable events causing rifts between the two characters to grow wider. Voices are heard, but both researchers deny speaking. Impossible fossils and creatures are discovered and never fully explained. A coyote den is found, but the animals seem to avoid it as best they can. Knocks can be heard at the door of the hexagonal research tent late at night. There's something about this wilderness that attracts living creatures and drives them mad. As these strange occurrences happen more often, the lines between reality and dreams blur. The two characters don't know if there are other people out there with them or even other creatures. Are they dreaming? What is that redness? Have they already left reality? What was that thing in the coyote den? Who are they? They are never fully explained, which in a way is much more terrifying than if we got some sort of clear explanation. Cosmic horror comes from a place that we can't fully see, and even if we could, we wouldn't be able to handle it. Coming in at number 4, we've got Tetsuo. Now for a complete change of pace, let's talk about Tetsuo from the cyberpunk classic Akira. If we saw next to nothing of the cosmic horror in They Remain, then we just about see all of it in Akira. It might not be immediately apparent how this flick falls under the cosmic category, so let me explain real quick. Tetsuo is essentially a prototypical Lovecraftian character. Following a motorcycle accident during what could be considered his normal life, he's introduced to some mind-altering information. He unlocks his psychic potential and immediately becomes a person of interest to to the government. At first, it seems like he might be able to control it, but before he can understand the scope of his powers and their implications, he tries to run away, and things only get worse from there. His psychic abilities begin to hurt him and the people around him, and he becomes egomaniacal, bordering on detached from reality. He's well on his way to becoming a cosmic creature, drunk on power and totally separate from his humanity. This doesn't even begin to describe what happens later on, though. Tetsuo, unable to control himself, begins transforming into a horrible, fleshy abomination, consuming everything and anything around him. Becomes large enough to destroy Neo Tokyo again, and eventually, after the intervention of all sorts of other interested parties, enters another level of existence. It's kind of like the Dunwich Horror, as an uncontrollable, unexplainable monster being born from some otherworldly power and running rampant through an unprepared town. It's fascinating and grotesque and upsetting, but damn if it isn't cool. Coming in at number 3, we've got Xenomorphs. We're all pretty familiar with this design by now, but back when Alien first hit the big screens, the Xenomorph was a horrific revelation. Designed by sci-fi legend H.G. Geiger and skillfully employed by director Ridley Scott, the titular Alien embodies so many different cosmic ideas. 1. No one understands it completely. The crew of the Nostromo are on a mission that they don't truly understand. In their search for the source of a distress signal, they come across an alien ship. Gigantic and filled with cryptic symbols, it is an enigma. It almost feels like someone coming across a Necronomicon and trying to parse the ancient texts without any previous knowledge. The fact that the Xenomorph that found its way onto the ship is like a little baby pawn adds to this. The crew can't possibly know the scope of the destruction they're inviting. 2. The Xenomorph kills without any regard for human life. Like all good cosmic creatures, it is 100% indifferent to people. It's alive and therefore will kill. You can't reason with it, you can't outsmart it, you just have to survive it. Xenomorphs operate on a whole other level, one we may never understand entirely. Coming in at number 2, we've got brain suckers. Bloodborne remains undefeated when it comes to cosmic horror in video games. Sure, you can make any number of Lovecraftian adaptations, but the world building, lore, and creature design will never reach the same levels. When it comes to creatures, the folks at FromSoft really know their stuff. On a first playthrough of Bloodborne, one might assume that there is a werewolf monster plague tearing through the town of Yharnam. Folks have rallied together to take down the hideous creatures, and in doing so have kind of gone mad themselves. Keep playing though, and you'll discover a much darker secret behind the monstrous visages. Somehow, the prevailing religious organization gained access to the blood of a race of ancient godlike creatures and began to use it to heal all sorts of ills. Well, one thing led to another, and now the whole world is mutating out of control. The only way to escape is to find the pale blood and transcend. Transcendence. Classic cosmic horror. Now, we've discussed some Bloodborne foes on the channel before, especially the many-eyed winter lanterns that drive one insane simply by looking at it. But if we want to go to some truly classic cosmic fare, maybe straight out of a D&D book, look no further than the brain suckers. These culty, tentacled lunatics will quite literally slurp the gray matter right out of your dome. What they end up doing with your brain is up in the air, but I like to imagine they might run off with it and put it in a tube, not unlike Amigo. Although that seems like too merciful a fate for a game like Bloodborne. They're much stronger than they seem, and if you ever get too close, it's curtains for your mind matter. Some even have the ability to shoot out a paralyzing beam to keep you in place. Do you think they're transmitting forbidden knowledge straight to your dome piece? I'd say that's a pretty effective way to keep someone incapacitated. And finally, at number 1, we've got Clover.
What? Oh! Oh no!
Yes, Cloverfield is a found footage monster movie, but that doesn't mean that it can't be a cosmic horror too. I mean, what's more fundamentally terrifying than a gigantic beast appearing out of nowhere, wrecking your city, and spawning all sorts of terrible little creatures to flush you out of your hidey holes? To have the universe subvert expectations so quickly and dramatically would break the minds of many a person. Clover may not be a god, but it is definitely an abomination. Add in the insanity that follows in 10 Cloverfield Lane, and if you really want the Cloverfield paradox, and you've got a wild world full of cosmic terror. We're all insignificant in the face of such terror, and must find a way to live without addressing it head on, lest we fall deep down the rabbit hole. Good luck. Does your brain hurt? Or is it crackling with these super cool possibilities of cosmic horror across the board? What did you think of my list? Do you agree with my choices, or are you going to write an essay in the comments decrying every aspect of my being? What's your favorite non-Lovecraftian cosmic horror? Do you think Lovecraft did it best, or did he lay the groundwork for later, greater cosmic terrors? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.
In at number 5, The Call of Cthulhu 2005. The Call of Cthulhu is a 2005 independent silent film adaptation of the H.P. Lovecraft short story of the same name. Directed by Andrew Lehman and distributed by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, the film begins with a dying professor leaving his great-nephew a collection of documents pertaining to the Cthulhu cult. The nephew then begins to learn why the study of the cult fascinated his grandfather, and bit by bit he begins piecing together the dreaded implications of his grandfather's inquiries, and soon he takes on investigating the Cthulhu cult as a crusade of his own. As he pieces together the dreadful and disturbing reality of the situation, his own sanity begins to crumble. The Call of Cthulhu is the first film adaptation of the famous story and uses mythoscope, a blend of vintage and modern filming techniques intended to produce the look of a 1920s era film. As of right now, the movie holds a 100% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with Dennis Schwartz calling it a haunting labor of love tribute. Running only 47 minutes long, The Call of Cthulhu doesn't need an excessive runtime to be effective, with it garnering a slew of awards including Best Feature at Erie Horror Film Festival and View's Audience Favorites winner. Coming in at number 4 we have The Mist 2007. The Mist, also known as Stephen King's The Mist, is a 2007 science fiction horror film based on the 1980 novella The Mist by Stephen King. The film was directed by Frank Darabont and follows David and his son, who become trapped in a supermarket along with some other townsfolk when suddenly a mist engulfs the entire city, bringing along bloodthirsty creatures that devour anyone in their path. Now, aside from some questionable acting and terrible special effects, which I have learned is due to the fact that the movie was intended to be in black and white, making the special effects look a little lackluster in color, this movie is genuinely terrifying. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, with the residents of a small town being trapped in a supermarket in an attempt to keep themselves safe from the monsters lurking outside. However, there may in fact be some monsters inside as well. The movie is as psychologically draining as it is emotionally draining, with it having a gut punch of an ending. For those who have watched the movie, you will know what I'm talking about. The director revised the ending of the film to be darker than the novel's ending, a change to which King was amenable. Although it's a monster movie, the central theme explores what ordinary people will be driven to do under extraordinary circumstances, with the ending showcasing that to all of us. As of right now, The Mist holds a 72% approval rating, with the general consensus reading, Frank Darabont's impressive camera work and politically incisive script make The Mist a truly frightening experience. Coming in at number 3, Reanimator 1985. Reanimator is a 1985 horror comedy film loosely based on the 1922 H.P. Lovecraft serial novella Herbert West Reanimator. Directed by Stuart Gordon, the film stars Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West, a medical student who has invented a reagent which can reanimate deceased bodies. He and his classmate Dan Kane begin to test the serum on dead human bodies and conflict with Dr. Carl Hill, who is infatuated with Kane's fiancée and wants to claim the invention as his own. Now, Reanimator isn't simply a zombie movie like its description makes it out to be, but it is also a tale of morality, the horrors of science, as well as how far we are willing to go to cure death. When the movie was first released on videotape, 2 versions were available, the unrated theatrical cut and an edited R-rated version. For those video stores whose rental policies would not allow them to rent unrated films that would be considered films with an MPAA rating of X. The film received hugely positive reviews by critics and viewers alike, with Roger Ebert giving the film 3 out of 4 stars and stating, "I walked out somewhat surprised and reinvigorated, if not reanimated, by a movie that had the audience emitting taxi whistles and wild goat cries." Reanimator was followed by Bride of Reanimator in 1990 and then Beyond Reanimator in 2003. In at number 2 we have The Void 2016. The Void is a 2016 Canadian supernatural horror film written and directed by Stephen Kostansky and Jeremy Gillespie, with the plot following a small group of people who become trapped in a hospital by a gathering of hooded cultists and by grotesque creatures. Part Hellraiser and part The Thing, The Void is a horror movie which will most definitely leave you untrusting of hospitals. From nurses skinning themselves to tentacled monsters and cultists in white hoods, there is a lot happening in The Void that will send shivers down any seasoned horror lover's back. Not to mention, it is overly bloody and incredibly weird, and like all cosmic horror movies, it successfully messes with your psyche, making you question everything you're seeing on screen. As of right now, The Void holds a 78% approval rating, with the general consensus reading, The Void offers a nostalgic rush for fans of low-budget 1980s horror, and legitimate thrills for hardcore genre enthusiasts of all ages. And finally, coming in at number 1 on, we have In the Mouth of Madness, 1994. In the Mouth of Madness is a 1994 horror film directed by John Carpenter and starring Sam Neill, Julie Carmen, and Charlton Heston. Informally, the movie is the third installment in Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, preceded by The Thing and Prince of Darkness. When horror novelist Sutter Kane goes missing, insurance investigator John Trent scrutinizes the claim made by his publisher, Jackson Harglow, and endeavors to retrieve a yet-to-be-released manuscript and ascertain the writer's whereabouts. Accompanied by the novelist's editor Linda Stiles and disturbed by nightmares from reading Kane's other novels, Trent makes an eerie nighttime trek to a supernatural town in New Hampshire. In the Mouth of Madness is the closest cinema has come to capturing the existential dread that H.P. Lovecraft built in his stories. The film itself pays homage to the work of Lovecraft with many references to his stories and themes. The title itself is also a play on his novella At the Mountains of Madness, with insanity playing a huge role in the film as it does in the book. Like the works of Lovecraft, In the Mouth of Madness will toy with your sanity, being filled to the brim with monsters, disturbing imagery, and plenty of twists and turns to satisfy any cosmic horror fan. In the Mouth of Madness currently holds a 59% approval rating, with the general consensus reading, if it fails to make the most of its intriguing premise, In the Mouth of Madness remains a decent enough diversion for horror fans and John Carpenter completists.